Good evening. It is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017. My name is Jacob.
And I'm Max.
And we are the Proteus Podcast, ideas in all shapes and forms. How you doing today, Max?
I'm doing pretty well, Jake, all things considered.
Yeah?
It's been an interesting day, or past few days, I should say.
What makes these days interesting?
Well, for one, I got my chainsaw stuck in a tree.
Oh, always a good time.
It's interesting. Normally, I'm pretty careful about it, but if anybody that listens to this podcast, all two or three of them,
Our ones of listeners.
has ever run a chainsaw, you can do really well and be fairly adept at it, and whoa, I'm stuck.
Oh, I got this thing stuck in this tree. There's few things as infuriating as getting any form of saw stuck in your work material.
It is.
Hand saws are even annoying because you can wedge a hand saw, and let me tell you what, rage. I mean, have you ever tried to throw a tree across the yard?
Once, it didn't work.
It doesn't work, but you want to because the tree, getting tools stuck, and which is all, and then of course you got to get the saw out of the tree. So how do you get your saw out of your tree?
Well, depending on the cut and what you're doing and the circumstances, fortunately the tree was not upright. It was already on the ground where this particular limb was. It was a fairly large piece of wood. Normally I'm a stickler for having felling wedges, which are amazing. The wedge is arguably one of the best simple machines, I think, that's ever invented.
Simple, right tool for the job.
It's the right tool for many jobs, but we won't get too much into that. Some reason I didn't have my wedges with me, like an idiot. What kind of woodsman am I? But
they don't just live in the back of your truck.
They used to, but occasionally,
back pants pocket.
Occasionally they'll get moved, and I don't know what was happening that day. And I just went, "Oh, I'll just leave my wedges at home. There's no possible way I could get my saw stuck." Wrong again.
Haha! It was a cool trick.
Murphy proved me wrong, as he sometimes does. So I went and got my Swedish forest axe, which is, fairly sharp enough to shave, though I wouldn't suggest it, and proceeded to carefully remove enough material to get the bar out, and that was it. Actually, it wasn't too horrible and terrible.
Well, again, the right tools for the job. If you don't have your wedges, a Swedish felling axe will get the saw unstuck.
Actually, I think that the best idea is to have the Swedish felling axe and the wedges, just in case.
And a splitting maul, and a sledgehammer.
I had the splitting maul with me.
All the tools. That's the thing, is sometimes also having all the tools for a job. There's nothing quite as frustrating as being there at the last second, trying to drive a screw, and having to use a hammer to do it.
So, but I guess the point in all this, folks, is that as much as technology changes the world for the better, sometimes going back to what some people would call the digital versus analog definitely has its place.
Analog definitely has its
place.
And it
always will.
And definitely always will. Again, having all the right tools for the job, because all the times I've injured myself the worst is when I'm using the wrong tool for the job. Really? I'm trying to drill a hole, but because all the wrong tools are here and the right tools are somewhere else, you're doing it with the screw and screwdriver and stab yourself with a Phillips screwdriver.
That's a neat trick.
It really sucks. Don't ever stab yourself with a screwdriver. It's uncomfortable and doesn't feel good.
It doesn't heal very well either.
It makes a neat little star pattern.
Well, I have a razor sharp knife, folks, and I've cut myself the tip of my finger with the knife. However, it was so sharp it made this really clean got, and I washed it really good and put some of that liquid skin on it, and it healed up beautifully within a few days.
Yeah. All my worst injuries heal up with stupid scars. I've got a little star shape somewhere on me from that.
Yeah, somewhere here. We won't. I won't look too hard.
So having the right tools and all of the right tools instead of most of the right tools really helps.
There you go.
What's interesting is and then there's certain tools that are just better. I ran into recently something called a lie flat tape measure. Have you ever used a tape measure, Max?
I've tried. For the most part, I've succeeded.
You know how they're kind of infuriating because they're cupped?
Yeah.
And so you got to roll it over and unhook it.
Oh, yeah.
A lie flat tape measure is essentially almost like a soft vinyl tape measure that is on a spring-loaded tape measure tool.
Really?
So you roll it out and it lays perfectly flat on your work surface.
I'm intrigued. I'm going to have to get on Amazon.
And they're not even particularly expensive. And they're also white. The ones I've rented, the tape measure is white with black markings, so it's high contrast, easy to read.
Oh.
But the fact that it lays perfectly flat makes it work so much nicer.
I'm intrigued now.
Says I ought to have a different tape measure that I absolutely hate. It's nice and bulky and it's hard to lose, but it's got a magnetized end. And at first blush you think, oh, lovely, a magnetized end. You can stick the end of things and run the tape out and it'll stay. Except for that's not what happens. All that happens is that end of your tape measure is stuck to the things you don't need it to be on. invariably cluttered up with fine magnetic grit.
Shavings,
and stuck to like a screw when you're trying to hook to the end of a board instead. And
that's funny because
it drives me nuts.
I don't know if these folks know, but I one of the many I'm a jack of all trades, definitely a master of none. As Jake knows, I worked in a welding shop in Midland, Texas for many years, and I can just see the humor and all the stupid stuff going on with a magnetic tape. Tape measure in a welding shop.
See, you're like, boy, that'll be handy. I can run it out and stick it to this and, measure interior. Oh, it is the most frustrating tool I've ever.
I can imagine in that shop, if you set it down for more than 10 minutes, it would have like 8 pounds of filings and shavings on it.
Exactly. It's one of those things that seems like a good idea until it isn't.
Until it isn't. I like
Same thing with those hammers that have the magnet in the top to hold a nail.
Yeah,
have you seen those?
They can be
it's got the little groove,
and
you put the nail, and you can whack and set your first nail. Once that magnet gets a little bit of iron filings on there, then the nail won't stay in the groove, and so just you whack and it flies off into. Okay, that's going to be in a tire later.
Sticks in someone's roof.
Turns out magnets are great, possibly magic, and not as handy as you'd think they'd be about half the time.
Well, they have their place.
They do have their place.
Well,
holding things to refrigerators.
The knife rack, the magnetic
knife rack is a fantastic addition to the kitchen.
That's changed my life. Even the tool rack is just. I thought, boy, I'm thinking about putting one in my truck.
Yeah.
If I can find a space where the airbag won't catch it, that's the trick, and it won't kill me if I get in a crash. God forbid.
Don't mount it on the front of the truck, so when you get into that forward-on collision, all the knives fly back at you.
Well, not the knives, but like tools. If I had a couple of hand tools that I wanted to keep in there, necessary stuff, channel locks, a couple of wrenches. Instead of keeping them in a tool bag, just keeping them somewhere in the truck where they're. I don't know. We'll have to see.
In that case, you might be better off because if you have access to like a metal firewall, like on the back behind the seat,
true,
fastening magnets to the tools.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
Get a couple good neodymium magnets, epoxy them to the tool, so you can just stick it to the wall firewall, and you can pull off, and then you can stick them other places.
Yeah.
When you're, if you need to stick it to the side of your vehicle while you're working.
Yeah.
That might be a more interesting choice. I don't know.
Oh, sorry, sir. It's a wrench.
It warrants experimentation, I think.
There you go.
That's another thing I found, that instead of using those hide-a-key boxes, which aren't particularly good magnets, buy yourself a pack of neodymium magnets and epoxy a magnet to the spare key.
That's not a bad idea.
Which makes it hide in smaller spaces, and it's not going to fall off because those neodymium magnets are where it's at.
I can barely get the ones off your refrigerator when I'm trying to get the bottle opener or whatever it is. I just want to have this cold beer.
Epoxying good neodymium magnets to things is a great way to hide stuff. You can because keys being brass, you can't stick them to magnets, but it's a great way to hide a key is just actually fasten a magnet to it. I'm not sure you want to use that in your ignition on a regular basis. Having a high-powered magnet there might do weird things. I don't know, especially in newer cars. But just as the key to get back into your car, kind of a key, which is usually what the hidden key's for. It's usually you locked your keys in your vehicle. Now you need to get in, so you've got your hidden key. But that's a slick and easy way to actually hide a key in a more effective way, I think, because you can hide it in weirder spots because it's much smaller. Because those hide-a-key boxes aren't small; they're almost the size of a deck of cards these days.
Yeah, some of them.
And that's but an actual key by itself on a magnet can be hidden in a much smaller area.
Yeah, speaking of tools, that really beats trying to break into your own truck or vehicle. I've done that before.
Yeah, that's not a fun process.
In my previous life in the Marine Corps, I had a staff sergeant who was also a repo man on the side, a man of many talents. He was an interesting fellow. I won't mention his name to protect his privacy. And I managed to lock my keys in my truck at one of the gas stations, and it was the particularly cold, wet, and miserable day in North Carolina.
I'm actually be beat on locking vehicles and keys. One time when headed out to the ranch, back when I lived in school, or lived on the ranch and was in college, I was 16 miles from town, got out of my vehicle, left it running, closed and locked all the doors.
Oh dear.
To open a gate.
Oh,
so here I am, nowhere near civilization, with a locked and running vehicle sitting there, standing there in the cold and rain, going, "No, this is not my finest moment."
Nope, it's not.
Did manage to get in with only extremely minor cosmetic damage to the vehicle.
True.
But that's my proudest moment of locking myself out of vehicles.
Oh boy. Well, I don't have you beat on this one, but anyways, my immediate supervisor, who was was a repo man on the side, managed to show up with a set of tools. for breaking and entering cars, everything, and basically showed me how to break into my truck. Had the air wedge.
The air wedge is the premier tool for that.
It is beautiful. And I've also figured out that I can use a barbecue poker and a plastic felling wedge to get in, but it's not quite as
quick and tidy.
But I have just come to the conclusion that I'll just have a spare key hidden somewhere, not on the truck, but an undisclosed yet secure location.
Yeah. Distributing spare keys to trusted persons like family members is also a good choice.
Yeah, but that depends on your family because...
I said trusted family members.
Not all family members are trusted or trustworthy, but that's another...
but we digress.
That's another story for another day.
So what other good tools have you seen lately?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that. Oh, I've been waiting for this, folks.
He's been waiting for this,
Back
to
saws.
Back to saws.
Oh, boy. I've used one. I don't own one. There's a company, and I want to reiterate, I'm not receiving any money for this. This is on my own volition, on my own conclusions that I've drawn. There's a Japanese company called Silky, and they make beautiful pull saws for tree work, cutting firewood, etc., so on and so forth. And they're amazing. You know, as much as I like the chainsaw, we get back to this analog versus digital kind of
there's a time when the handsaw is just a better choice.
It is. And these handsaws they cut smooth, they cut like I've never seen any before. There's one that I'm particularly lusting after, and I use the word lusting loosely and incorrectly, but just so the folks get an idea. And it's like a 19.5, 20-inch saw, but it's kind of like a crosscut saw in a way. The teeth are a little different. It cuts on the pull stroke, but it's kind of like a one-man. If you don't want to use a chainsaw, this thing supposedly rips through logs like it's no one's business. If you don't want to break out the chainsaw, I have several chainsaws. One of them is particularly cantankerous, although it's very useful, and it doesn't always want to start. And sometimes it's just nice to get a good saw and use that. Yeah, for
small work when you don't want to actually start a saw, or you need to do it more quietly in a
true
upper class neighborhood or something.
They are noisy. That's true.
Minor tree trimming in upper class neighborhoods during evening hours. Be rude to be running a loud chainsaw while someone's trying to watch football, or so on. So, and like you said, a lot of times, just for sheer convenience, the handsaw is the way to go.
It is. In this case,
when you don't want to pack 25 pounds worth of chainsaw up a tree to do a little bit of limb work.
Very, very true.
The handsaw is king.
Well, this particular model is, from what they're saying in the reviews and the videos that I've seen, the internet being the wonderful place that it is, the teeth go from almost very fine to quite coarse at the very end. And with good, steady pulling action and a little bit of practice, these people seem to think it cut, as well as some chainsaws. So
that's impressive.
I've got to figure out a way, folks, to cobble together $198 some odd to acquire one. If anyone wants to make any donations,
$198 handsaw, people. You heard it here first. Such a thing exists, and it is marvelous.
You get what you pay for. So if anybody wants to give me that for Christmas, all 2 or 3 of our listeners, I will gladly evaluate it and give my objective feedback on it at a later date and time.
Well, sounds like a heck of a saw.
Enough about the tools I'm lusting over. Surely, Jake, you're lusting after some sort of tool, hand tool.
Of course, now that you've put me on the spot, I can't think of anything.
I know there's something there. Think for a minute. I'll rattle on here.
You rattle on while I cogitate. I can't have thought of anything.
Surely, not one of those fancy screwdrivers that they've reviewed on the interwebs.
I actually got one of those.
You have one of those?
I bought the finest screwdriver money can buy. It's too late. It's Canadian.
I agree, though. I agree with you. A good screwdriver is worth the money because there's nothing worse than having a piece of junk.
Yeah,
when you need it most.
It really does make a difference. Once you've used good tools, cheap, junky tools are so frustrating.
They are.
It's like the difference between a genuine crescent wrench and every other knockoff adjustable wrench.
Oh, yeah.
Crescent wrenches stay where you put them. Like you adjust them to a size and it stays there.
Then jiggle around.
All the other ones, you look at it funny and it's no longer that size. It's either smaller or larger. And once you've used the real thing, you're like, why is this other one so horrible? It's amazing how spoiled you'll get using good tools.
Good channel locks. Good channel locks change my life.
Yeah.
Well, you can do anything with a decent set of channel locks. Well, almost anything. I mean, that's
It makes so much difference to have the good tools for what you're doing. Really good screwdrivers. You wouldn't think, okay, a screwdriver is a screwdriver is a screwdriver. except when you have good screwdrivers that actually
Oh, yeah.
fit the screws you're
Yeah,
working
yeah,
with
yeah.
and
Your
are
hand.
the appropriate hardness of material, a good tool steel screwdriver. Because nothing's quite as aggravating as when your screwdriver starts to get like it grinds off on screws. It's softer than the screws you're putting, and after a while the tip's all mangled and doesn't fit anything anymore.
Been there, done that.
You know, I want to ruin screws, not the screwdriver. That's
Right.
my gold standard for screwdrivers.
This is
Is
true.
I'd rather maim a screw and strip the screw out and have to get an easy out to get the screw out than have to throw this whole screwdriver away because the screw was somehow harder material than what I was using to put it in. Cheese grade screwdriver.
Cheese grade metal. I like that. I'll write that down.
The right hardness for machining hard cheeses. This is
Hard cheeses?
Yeah, this is a cheese grade steel, tool steel.
Machining hard cheeses. Well, you know, that reminds me. There's a couple of other tools I'm lusting after, but not quite on the same level, you know, as this saw. However, I've also discovered there's some great axes to be had. In addition to the one I own, there's a company in Germany. I won't mention the name because I'm not sure I can pronounce it. They make outstanding axes, and they're fairly reasonably priced. And being Germans, in every sense of the word, they have looked after. They've accounted for every foreseeable contingency. The one I'm looking at has got an overstrike guard on it, made out of aluminum or some kind of sheet steel.
Overstrike guards are very nice.
As good as I think I am swinging a tool like that, boy, it sure is nice to have. You don't ruin the handle. Good axe handles are hard to come by in this town and many places. They don't seem to fit correctly, or the companies that are making them don't.
Well, as from what I've learned about a little bit about axe handles recently, somehow, and really, even the mass-produced axe handles, you are expected to take a spoke shave to that thing and adjust it to fit.
Well, no, I understood that.
You know, they're made close, and then you're supposed to go the rest of the way.
No, there's always a certain amount of sanding and spoke shaving and fitting involved. However, I looked through a box of them at our local hardware store, and one of them was close. The rest of them were actually too small, and they were the allotted size per this company, per the company that made the axe handle and the axe head. This is the size that you need, and I think just quality control is lacking, and they just
could
don't
be
care
that
anymore.
they're drying in shipment a little
That's a
bit,
good
and
point.
they're shrinking.
We live in a dry climate.
Our dry climate, they may be shrinking out of tolerance out here. So, you know, soak them in something.
Let them swell up a little.
Something that doesn't evaporate.
Or drive to.
I won't tell you the 2 or 3
to,
dangerous chemicals you should use, but I did remember though a tool that I don't need but desperately want.
We don't have to need it. We want it.
Yeah. And I'm gonna have to show you a picture of this, Max.
He's showing me this, folks,
and he doesn't even know what it is.
This.
Let me explain this. This is a very unique tool. This is called a Smith soldering and brazing gas-saving cutting torch stand for acetylene torches.
That's interesting.
Have you ever used an acetylene cutting torch, Max?
Many times.
You know the part where you turn the gas on, light the torch, turn your oxygen until everything's just right.
Adjust it, yeah.
And then you do a little bit of cutting, and then you have to stop and mess with something, so you have to shut the torch off. Mm-hmm. And then you have to do all that over again.
We don't necessarily have to shut the torch off. I knew a guy in the welding shop, he had a little stand, and you would set it there. And if you set it there long enough, he'd come and light a cigarette or pipe or cigar or whatever he was smoking. But it was highly frowned upon. I'll shut up now.
Well,
you continue.
Now, this is almost that. What this is it hooks in line between your torches, your torch itself, and your bottles. You have a section set of hoses, basically, right? And then this device has a standing pilot light on it that runs off of your acetylene. And then it's got this long hook arm on it, which you see, which you hang your torch on. So what you do is you set your torch, get it lit, set it just the way you want, do your cut, and then when you're done, you hang your torch on that arm.
Really?
That arm activates a set of valves and shuts the torch off.
Really?
But it leaves all your settings alone.
Really?
Just it cuts off the flow of fuel and oxygen to the torch, but it leaves that standing pilot light. So when you're ready to go again, you immediately pick up your torch, swing it past that pilot light, and are instantly back to your previous torch setting. Lights it right back up, right to where you were before you stopped.
That's convenient.
I don't use a cutting torch enough to need one of these. I don't even need to use a cutting torch enough to want one of these, but I desperately think this is the premier tool for torching.
It would almost be worth it in the gas you save.
Yeah.
I don't know if the folks know welding gases and in all their entirety, whether they're flammable or inert, are not cheap.
No, Not cheap, but this device, like I said, because it uses just a little trickle of acetylene to keep a little pilot going, lets you do the, turn your torch off and on repeatedly without ever having to mess with the settings, which is the most tedious part of messing with using a cutting torch, is fooling with these very sensitive little dials to get that thing just right for what you're doing, welding or cutting or brazing or any number of things. But once I learned this tool existed, I instantly wanted one.
We'll see. There you go. Well, what else are you lusting after? Surely there's something.
I'm
not
sure,
to put you on the spot.
I'm sure there's many more tools that
I've got a list here somewhere in my back pocket or in my pants somewhere that I really don't need this, but I wouldn't mind.
There's a $12 caulking gun that I'd like to have if I ever have to caulk anything again, that somehow, through some witchcraft, sucks things back a little bit so that your caulk never drips. Like, when you're caulking something and you stop, and the pressure you've added to the thing, it just starts piling on extra caulk after you're no longer wanting it to come out. Somehow this one doesn't do that.
I think that would be worth it.
Possibly witchcraft. $12 caulking gun. Gonna get one next time I need one.
I'm gonna be honest, folks. I think that would actually be worth it. Yeah. And the problem is,
$12 isn't much compared to what caulking guns are like, $5 or $6.
But you know what? The $5 and $6 caulking guns, they always seem to break. Not work.
If you keep them clean, they last. But
that was always the great mystery. When we were roofing. And,
who ruined this caulking gun?
Yeah, or where is the caulking gun? Or why has it disappeared? They seem to grow legs and run away.
Yeah,
that's just my observation.
Here's another tool I forgot I needed.
Uh-oh.
This is the Malcolm TSCM corrugated metal turbo shear.
What's that?
This device, oddly enough, it looks like this.
My goodness.
It's insane. It clamps onto a cordless drill. Right? Like this. It goes on the cordless drill and allows you, it's a shear and it'll cut. It converts rotary action into scissor action, and you can use it to cut corrugated metal.
That's amazing.
If I ever have to put on another roof, I'm buying one of these. This is a $100 pair of fancy scissors.
That'd be worth it, though.
And I'm convinced that
if I never have to touch a pair of really
for a collection of regions. Hooks to a cordless drill, and you know how good those have gotten.
Oh, yeah.
Which means you don't have to drag a cord around while you're doing this, and so you can take it up on the roof to make cuts if you need to. Why don't I own one of these? Because I don't do enough roofing to justify it just yet.
Well, like I said, if I never have to touch a pair of really crappy tin snips again, I'll be all right.
The difference between crappy tin snips and good tin snips is truly incredible, actually.
Really? Maybe I'll have to. That might be another. We might have to revisit that.
Yeah, buying good tin snips. I can't remember the brand that's the good one these days.
The ones that don't sell here.
The ones Mr. Ursh had.
Oh yeah.
Good tin snips. You can buy them here actually, but they cost. Really, just make all the difference in the world.
Oh, speaking of other tools, I don't know if this technically qualifies as a tool, but I've got some, and I don't use them very often, but I do keep them in the truck, and they're really handy. Road flares.
You can still get road flares?
They are legal, and you can buy them at the hardware store. Our hardware store recently, folks, I won't name it, in this small town, they had some sort of sale, and anything you put in this bag, you got, I don't know, 20 or 30% off.
I didn't know they still had road flares. I remember seeing them back in 10 years ago, but then I hadn't seen them in stock in years.
Well, to the untrained eye, they look like dynamite, but they're not. Have no fear.
I hadn't even seen untrained eye dynamite in a long time, so I'm surprised they're still available. I need to get me some road flares.
They're handy to have, and so because they were so cheap and the sale was going on, they don't cost much anyways. I loaded up on road flares, and I still have some in the truck somewhere. I went to light a slash pile from a tree job I was doing, and don't worry, folks, it was legal. It was quite cold and wet outside, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to haul this off or get it on fire by traditional means. I didn't have a propane torch with me. I said, you know what? Road flare. And stuck that road flare in there, and boy, it lit it up good and made quite a show in the process.
That reminds me of a funny story. I used to play a video game with a guy that was fireman. Professional fireman. Kind of guy that they actually, they're like on a 12-hour shift at a time. Or so many day shift, and they just live at the firehouse, and you get to go home on your off times. So, most of the time so he'd sit around in the firehouse and play video games, waiting to be called out. There's not a lot else to do. But he said one of the most annoying calls he ever got called out on is they got called out for a road flare. Someone had lit a road flare more on purpose or by accident and called the fire department because they didn't know what to do. Apparently, the regulations for where he was is once you're on a call, you stay until the fire's out.
Yeah.
So the road flare is on fire. And there's no way to put out a road flare.
Yeah, a lot of magnesium and strontium.
you can't do it. You can bury it in sand, put it in a bucket of water, it'll keep burning. So they literally had to sit there in lawn chairs on the side of the road and watch this road flare for like, I don't know how long they burned, but hours and hours. It just
long enough.
Watch this stupid road flare. Because apparently, now I've heard it said that there is a type of fire extinguisher manufactured for the sole person putting out a road flare, and I have no idea how it works.
Really?
But they're incredibly expensive, and most fire departments don't carry them because how often do you need one? You probably have to have it replaced more times than you'll ever use it.
We just halon? Yeah, halon, because halon displaces oxygen.
Yeah, but similar road flares don't use oxygen. Well, they supply their own.
They got magnesium.
That's what baffles me. I have no idea how this device would work.
Some sort of chemical witchcraft.
Some kind of chemical witchcraft to put out a road flare.
Wow.
But most places don't have these on hand because when are you going to need to put out a road flare? So
that's a good point. Well,
but apparently, once again, the right tool for the job is available.
I think that's the theme in this episode, this installment.
Absolutely, the right tool for the job.
The right tool for the job. Well, sometimes the right tool for a job is a 6-pound sledgehammer. I've learned that.
Yeah. Absolutely, the right tool for the job is sometimes a 6-pound sledgehammer. Unfortunately, sometimes the right tool for the job is a 12-pound sledgehammer, and then you're not having fun.
Well, they're not terrible. You just have to resign yourself to.
At some point, 12. Remember, Max, the 12-foot digging bar?
Oh, I do remember that. That was an interesting day.
That was one of the worst days of hole digging I've ever experienced.
Well, for the people that don't know, we were digging. We were digging.
We were digging a footing. We were digging a 4-foot by 4-foot by 4-foot cube out of the ground.
Out of the ground, and it's
actually it was closer to 5 feet, almost 6 feet deep. I think
really,
at the
6
end.
Feet deep. Yeah, because I got down in there, and I'm about 6 feet tall.
You were basically underground.
Underground. We were underground.
Max was ground level. I was on ground level. Mm-hmm. We're trying to chisel out this piece of soil.
We made a human jackhammer.
This piece of soil was approximately the texture and durability of poured reinforced concrete.
Mm-hmm. Tough stuff.
And ultimately, this resulted in 2 people operating one digging bar to produce enough force to shave off, slivers of soil at a time. And we dug this hole.
We did it.
We 2-man operation on a 12-foot digging bar, which probably weighed 50 or 60 pounds.
It was pretty sturdy. I remember
a hefty piece of steel.
Yeah, after my muscles had recovered from that, I felt particularly muscular. Standing in my underwear, looking in the mirror, going, "Oh, I look good." Well, probably not that good.
One of the greatest insults of all time, though, is that hole ended up not getting used for its intended purpose and was eventually filled back in.
Oh well, we did an all right job.
But we did our job. We dug that hole on the side of a mountain.
There you go. So then that's another case where we did not have a. No, we didn't have a jackhammer.
We didn't have a jackhammer. I don't think it would have been a good choice to try to manhandle. Because a jackhammer weighs close to 200 pounds, probably. To manhandle one of those off the side of a mountain.
They make those gas-powered ones. I have run one of those.
That sounds even worse. I've used a regular air-powered jackhammer with the great big, inch airline, and that was no fun. I can't imagine having gasoline added to that equation being any less pleasant.
What could go wrong with this?
Anyways.
On the side of a hill. Gasoline, jackhammer, down in a hole.
I just don't see that helping. So, sometimes hand tools still are the right tool for the job.
They are. As much as it pained us to say that. There you go.
Yeah. So anyways, Max, do you have a quote today?
Well, I have a quote. I have several quotes.
Even vaguely related to the subject at hand?
Oh, not really, no. Well, actually, sort of, yeah. I think I've used this quote before. As some people told me, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
That's true. If you're not cheating by using a bigger tool, you're not trying.
Yeah.
See,
right. What did Red Green say? If the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy.
Yeah, that's a really good quote. I like that.
Actually, I think that would apply better to this situation.
See, I'm trying to find the exact quote, but I'm having a trouble for all of a sudden because reasons. Here we go. So apparently, this is attributed to Marine Major Holdridge, which doesn't sound like enough of a name for attribution, but it said, sometimes it's entirely appropriate to kill a fly with a sledgehammer.
I like that too. I think that might be the best. That might be the better of the quotes.
Well, because sometimes, again, the right tool for the job, but every once in a while, overkill and the wrong tool for the job is just what you need. So, anyways, Max, are you jaded today?
Not as much as I could be.
Oh, that's good. Me neither.
Well,
on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you're at?
I would say I'm between a 3 and a 3.5.
3 and a 3.5. Ooh, that's precision there, ladies and gentlemen.
I'd say closer to the 3.
3.25.
3.25 is a good decimal measure for that. I'm going to go with that.
I'm just going to go with a 4 because I don't want to, take away your glory here.
No, I mean, no, please. 2 1/4 is acceptable.
2 1/4.
If you're
4,
feeling
3.
it.
No,
I would never.
I'm going to go with a 4. So anyways, if you've liked what you heard here today, feel free to follow us on Twitter to be updated when new podcasts are posted. And if you have any comments, email them to proteuspodcast@gmail.com. And as always, remember to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube, and other places fine podcasts are purveyed. All that being said, I've been Jacob.
I've been Max.
And we have been the Proteus Podcast. Good night, everyone.